Hey, how you doing? I was just checking my email here. I wanted to read you this one. I don't know who the author of this is, but I just received this email today from my mom. The only survivor of a shipwreck was washed up on a small, uninhabited island. He prayed fervently for God to rescue him. Every day he scanned the horizon for help, but none seemed to be coming. Exhausted, he eventually managed to build him a little hut out of the driftwood to protect him from the elements and to store a few of his possessions. One day, after scavenging for food, he arrived home to find his little hut up in flames. With smoke rolling up into the sky, he felt that the very worst had happened and everything was lost. He was stunned with disbelief, grief, and anger. And he cried out, "God, how could you do this to me?" Early the next day, he was awakened by the sound of a ship approaching the island. It had come to rescue him. He said, "How did you know I was here?" And the rescuers replied, "We saw your smoke signal." Now, lots of time, we're going through life and we're just going through stuff. It's got us beat down, and all the time we're looking for the earthly, physical, logical answer to our problems. Those are most of the times when we'll cry out to God and say, "God, I don't see an answer. I don't see a way out of this. Only a miracle that I know of will get me out of this situation." And God calls for several things. One of them is faith, and one of them is patience, and the other one is humbleness. Now, lots of times we know about faith, and we know that once we get in faith, we know it. We don't have to see our problem. We don't have to see the solution. But we know who God is and who He says He is. And we know that He's able and that He will deliver us. That's what He called Himself, was our deliverer. And then we've been taught many times that we have to keep that and stay in patience. We have to hold on. If we're in faith, then we'll hold on to patience. But a lot of times we forget about the humbleness part. Let me read you a verse. 1 Peter 5, verse 6 and 7. "Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you." Now, the King James says that He may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares on Him. But a lot of times we skip over that first part that says, "Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God." So many times we want God to fix it our way. We want God to fix it in our time. We want God to take care of the things the way we can figure it out. Well, if we could handle all that stuff, we wouldn't be praying for it most of the time. But the thing is, we've got to do what this verse says. Verse 6, "Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God." In other words, humble yourself to God's wisdom and power and let Him perform. Let Him show you what He can do. Let me read you one more story. This is found in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through about 42. And Jesus had just come over the sea, and verse 21 says, "When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around Him, and so He stayed by the seashore. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up, and on seeing Him fell at His feet and implored Him earnestly, saying, 'My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live.'" Now this fellow Jairus was already moving in a bit of humbleness. He was a religious ruler of that day. So he was going around to this traveling prophet, evangelist, preacher guy, and he was seeking help from Jesus. So he was already stepping down, kind of the world would view it as, but he was humbling himself before the power of God. In verse 30, Jesus was walking on, and He had told Jairus that he would come to his house. And then they were walking in with all this crowd pressing in on them. So many that, you were just getting bumped every which way and squeezed. And a lady that had a hemorrhage reached out to touch Jesus' robe and touched it and was healed. And Jesus, verse 30, "Immediately Jesus, perceiving in Himself that the power proceeding from Him had gone forth, turned around in the crowd and said, 'Who touched my garments?'" Now then you got the disciples who had been walking with Him every single day, and even they are saying, "What kind of question is this, Jesus?" And verse 31, He says, "And His disciples said to Him, 'You see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, "Who touched me?'" And I believe it was Brother Keith Moore that said, I always wondered when I read those scriptures, what was going through Jairus' head? His daughter's at home. They're racing to try and save her before she dies. Now Jesus is turning around in this huge crowd and saying, "Who touched me?" Now you know he had to put his pride under and step into the humility and humble himself before God to continue on. And then if that wasn't enough, in verse 35, while he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official Jairus, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore?" But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid any longer, only believe." Now Jairus stepped into humility. He had patience, he had faith, and he humbled himself before God. He humbled himself to the wisdom and the power of God. And in verse 41, we see what happened. Taking the child by the hand, Jesus said to her, "Talitha cumi," which translated means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old, and immediately they were completely astounded. Now the next time you're facing one of those mountains in your life and you don't see any way out of your situation, you don't see any logical explanation for deliverance in your life, believe in God. Only believe. Have patience in who He is. And humble yourself to His wisdom. He's got it figured out. You hold on to faith, patience, and humility before Him, and you will see the power of God manifested in your life. I hope that's helped somebody. I know it's helped me when I needed it. And I'll talk to y'all later. Bye now.